Let's see what the Karikas say about the Gunas. Translation on page 76. The constituents, the Gunas, are of the nature of pleasure, pain, and infatuation. Sattva provides pleasure, happiness, material happiness, not the bliss of Atman, but when the mind is sattvic, it's peaceful and it's content and it's happy. What about Rajas? Rajas produces pain. Rajas seeks or constantly seeks happiness through desire, through chasing desire, right? Rajas and raga, it's the same word, same root. But a Rajasic person is always miserable and frustrated because it never attains. So that's pain. And what about tamas? Infatuation or delusion, bewilderment. So these three serve to illumine, that's sattva, to actuate, rajas, to make things happen, to provide energy, and to restrain. So things that have solidity, the very fact that we have forms, something is restraining property into the shape of a book. Why doesn't it just melt or spill into this? Well, because tamas is the one that restrains. It's one of its functions, or demarcates. Okay. So what do they do? So where are we? 12. And what do they do, these gunas? They serve to illumine, to actuate, and to restrain. They mutually domineer. They compete. When you're trying to be sattvic, you're trying to make your sattva dominant. Rajas is complaining away. Rajas is trying to compete. Rajas is trying to disturb your sattva. You're trying to meditate, and then Rajas comes up in the mind and wants a coffee or wants action or get up or do something. So they're competing. Meditation is a very, you can really see these gunas at play. And what else is competing when you're meditating? Tamas. Tamas is like, oh, it's too early, go back to sleep, don't be a fanatic, have another little nap, get back to your meditation in an hour. Tamas, okay? So therefore, they mutually domineer, rest on each other, produce each other, consort together, they're always in a dance, and they're reciprocally present all the time. These three gunas are interacting and competing for prominence. Okay, this might be an interesting bhasha. So we go to page 75. Okay, a little bit better for you. Are we okay with this? Verse.
Well, I do have a question, Edwin.
Yeah.
You said that the gunas are in the unmanifest, and how is that possible?
What is the unmanifest? It's nothing other than the three gunas in a state of latency.
Okay.
Where do the three gunas come from? Everything has to come from the unmanifest. If we're going to say the gunas don't come from the unmanifest, where do they come from? Somewhere else then? Well, what's that something else?
From mind.
So what the difference between the manifest and the unmanifest, the difference is that in the manifest, the gunas are active and competing and domineering. Whereas in the unmanifest, they're in a state of neutrality. Really what's happening is Rajas is neutralizing, Tamas is neutralizing Rajas. There's no action, there's no movement, so there's no churning of the milk, so no yogurt is emerging. There's no churning of the gunas. Rajas is neutralized, because Rajas is really, I'm going to mute you all again, because Rajas is the one that stirs in the first place. So the gunas are latent in the unmanifest. Prakriti is the three gunas. It's not that Prakriti is something else. Well, if Prakriti is not the three gunas, then what the heck is Prakriti then? It's nothing other than the three gunas. Otherwise, if you're going to say Prakriti is something else, and then what? And then the three gunas emerge in the Vyakta. What? Number one, where do they come from? Number two, what is Prakriti then? If it's not the three gunas, it's something else. Well, there's no description of anything else. It is the three gunas. So let's read the bhasha. It has been said, right, in one of these karikas, that the manifest and the unmanifest, the vyakta and the avyakta, are possessed of the three gunas. He has attributes. We'll use the word gunas to explain these gunas and their nature, right? Let's explain. Right. The meaning is that the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are of the essence. What essences do they have? Right? The essence of the sun is light and heat. That's the essence. When you talk about the sun, you say, what's the sun? We say, its essence is essentially it is light and heat. So what's the essence of the gunas? Okay, well, sattva is of the nature of priti, pleasure. Not to be confused with the ananda of the Atman, it's a completely different thing. But when we're sattvic, we're pleasant, we're content, we're happy, we're peaceful. So sattva is of the nature of priti, pleasure. Having that as the nature, sattvic people are happy people. We live in a culture that makes us think that to be happy you have to be rajasic and accumulate and chase your desires. This is an avidya society. A vidya society emphasizes detachment and simplicity and so forth. So, what about rajas? Rajas is of the nature of apriti, the opposite. Priti is when you put an in front of a noun in Sanskrit, it's the opposite. Vidya, avidya. So apriti, but that's pain. When we're very rajasic, we're miserable, we're driven, we're tormented, we can't fulfill our desires, however hard we try. So that's pain. What about tamas? Tamas is the nature of vishada, delusion. When we're in tamasic, we're just completely deluded. We Krishna says you take dharma to be adharma and adharma to be dharma, delusion. Again, these gunas are adopted to illuminate sattva, to activate rajas, and to restrain, another way of thinking about them. Whenever there's illumination, perception, the mind is very sattvic. All cognitive functionings are highly sattvic. And any kind of activity, even blinking, look, I'm blinking my eyelid, that's rajas. So that's activation. Any kind of movement is rajas. And to restrain, when there's restraint, solidity, now it's winter, it's a tamasic time, everything is restrained, the sap goes down to the roots, this is all tamas. The word artha in the karika, what's the purpose, what's the nature, is expressive of capacity, power. The sattva has, what's the power of each of these? What's its capacity? What's its nature? The sattva has its artha. What's its artha? Its purpose, its capacity, its power. What is it? Illumination means that it's competent to illuminate. So all, as I said, cognitive functions, perception, even in physical things, the more luminous something is, light itself is more sattva in it. The sense is that rajas is adapted to activate and tamas to restrain, to fix a thing. It would fix it. Otherwise, if it was everything was rajas, it would just be fiery movement all over the place. Nothing would be solid or fixed. You'd have no solidity. So that's tamas. Thus, the gunas are of the nature of illumination, activity, and fixture. The three gunas. Again, these mutually suppress. Right. So when we sleep, then tamas takes over the mind. It suppresses sattva and rajas. In deep sleep, nidra. One of the vrittis of Patanjali, that's tamas is maximized. So they suppress, they support. Okay, so rajas might be in yoga, you have to use rajas when you want to do your asanas and you're supporting sattva. You're trying to get to a place of sattva, but you're using rajas to, whatever it is, to control the mind, to, practice, to do your practices. So they support, they produce, they consort, and they exist. Right, he's going to go through them. They are described as mutually suppressive, mutually supporting, mutually productive, mutually consorting, and mutually existing. What does all that mean? Well, mutually suppressive means they overcome one another. Right, when we want to meditate, we want sattva to overcome rajas and tamas. That's the goal. And then we can fix our minds. But at sleep, we want to get to sleep. We don't want to be, when it's time to go to bed, you want to get to sleep. And if you're restless, that's no good. So you want tamas to overpower rajas and sattva. You want to close down your senses. You want to close down perception. So at that point, you want tamas to be dominant. So mutually suppressive, that's what it means. They suppress each other, means they overcome one another. And they becoming manifest with the characteristics of pleasure, pain. Just as, okay, when Sattva dominates, what happens? What happens when Sattva dominates? Then at that time, dominating over or suppressing, another way of saying you dominate, well, you're suppressing Rajas and Tamas with its characteristics. So the characteristics of Sattva become dominant, suppressing the characteristics of Rajas and Tamas, action and inertia, with its characteristics. And then what happens? It manifests itself as pleasure and illumination, happiness, contentment. Rajas starts to stir, and all of a sudden the mind becomes distressed and anxious and agitated and tormented, and it needs this and it needs that, and I haven't done this and I haven't done that. That's a Rajasic mind, always never at peace. Always thinking there's something to do, something to do, something to do. I shouldn't be sitting here. There's something to do. So that's Rajas. Do you relate to that? When we're Rajasic, we're always thinking that there's something. We're never at peace. We're always thinking, I should be doing something. I should be doing something. There's this nagging feeling. That's a Rajasic mind. Always this impulse. I should be working. Should be doing. Okay, so when Rajas dominates, then what happens? The Sattva and Tamas, it does so with its characteristics of pain and activity. Pain, dukkha doesn't just mean physical pain. It means, frustration. It means always somehow feeling that you're missing something, you're lacking something, you should be doing something. The sense of malaise, ill-at-easeness, incompleteness. These are symptoms of Rajas. I know them very well, my friends. I was born Rajasic, and thank God for yoga. When Tamas dominates the Sattva and Rajas, then it does so through its characteristic of delusion and fixture. We get deluded, we invent nonsense, just delusions in our mind, fantasy. These are all Tamas. And fixture, stability. So they are mutually productive. And also Tamas can be also very myopic. One, just tribalism, all of these isms, racism, sex, that's just Tamas, where we don't recognize commonality, my block, my neighborhood, my tribe. So it delimits, it fixes, it encloses. So that's all Tamas. The more narrow-minded we are, the more Tamasic we are. Rajas is or places to go, people to meet, always restless, always running around. What's next? What's the next flavor? What's the latest thing? What's going on? That's Rajas, right? Only Sattva produces happiness. Think of that, because we've grown up thinking Rajas will give us happiness, that we need to accumulate, make money, and chase after desires. Then we'll be happy. So this is a very different model of what. And we're not talking about the bliss of Atman. Keep that in mind. We're just talking about mundane mental bliss. Not bliss, contentment, priti, happiness. Okay, so further, the attributes are mutually supporting. They support each other like a binary. They're mutually productive, just as a lump of clay produces a jar. Right, so a better example it gives later on is the lamp. So you have the wick, you have the oil, you have the flame, and they mutually support each other. They're different things. The lamp itself, the flame, the wick, the oil, but they all work together to produce illumination. So I think that comes a bit late. That's a very typical Samkhya example. So what else? I think we can skip. Oh, but there's a nice thing. Go down to right after Bhagavad Gita 3:28. About 10 lines from the end of the paragraph. Here's a really interesting little example. How the same thing can be a cause of Sattva to one person, Rajas to another person, and Tamas to another person. He gives the example of a beautiful and virtuous woman. So she's a source of delight to all, because she's beautiful and virtuous and dharmic, right? We all love to see beautiful, righteous, everybody appreciates a righteous, good karma kind of individual. And she herself is she herself is the cause of pain to her co-wives. So to some people, they see her, they create sattva in the mind of some. But of course, this is back then when, kings had more than one wife, just like they did everywhere in the world. But she might cause pain to her co-wives. Maybe she's favored. So the same person which causes sattva to some people is causing rajas to others, because they want to be primary, whatever, wives. And again, she herself produces delusion in the passionate, in the manner, right? She causes delusion. People fantasize about, perhaps being with a woman like that. So but the point is, the same woman can and he's trying to give it. I don't know. Maybe this is a really bad example, but that's the example. The same thing can cause sattva in one context, rajas in another, and tamas in another. Or what else? Let's look at the king. Maybe that's a better example. Jump down a couple of lines. Just as a king, assiduous in protecting his people and punishing the wicked, the same king produces pleasure in good people because they want to have a dharmic king and they want to be protected. So it's pleasurable for good people, and pain and delusion in the wicked. So he's just trying to give examples. In this manner, Rajas produces Sattva and Tamas. The first example of the beautiful woman was how Sattva can produce Rajas and Tamas. Here's an example of how Rajas can produce Sattva and Tamas. So each of them can produce the other. They're mutually interdependent and supportive. And now what about Tamas? How does Tamas bring about the other two? Well, in a similar manner, Tamas brings about the existence of Sattva and Rajas, but by its own nature of covering. So for example, the clouds covering the sky, that's tamas, because tamas covers. But they cause happiness to the world because they bring rain. So here, or a good sleep brings happiness. They urge the farmer to activate by their rain. So they also produce rajas in the farmer. The rajas says, oh, good, it's raining. Let me get out and work the fields. And they produce delusion in the lovers in separation. The lovers want to meet in the forest. It's going to rain. Oh, so they're deluded. So these are just examples. I don't know if they're helpful. He's just trying to say how one guna can produce the other two. And he's given 3 examples. How Sattva can produce Rajas and Tamas with the beautiful woman, can produce, Rajas in the co-wives and Tamas in those who, fantasize about her. So that's Sattva producing Rajas, Tamas. Then how about Rajas? Well, Rajas, like the king, can produce sattva in the good. They're happy because of the king, but he produces tamas in the wicked. Second example. Third one, tamas. What about tamas? Well, tamas, like the rain, it can produce sattva, because it's rain, and we want rain, and it can produce. Tamas is a covering of the sky. It produces sattva because if people are happy, it's going to rain, and it produces rajas because the farmers can now know, okay, we need to get out and work our fields. All right, let's move on. And we'll go to the translation. We're not going to read this. We'll just read the verse. 15. Sattva is considered to be buoyant and enlightening. Anything which is light, which floats, which is buoyant, it has some sattvic component. A feather has more sattva than a metal bar. So buoyancy is a feature of sattva. Okay, so that's just one way of thinking. Another way of thinking it. What about rajas? It's stimulating and mobile. Everything's stimulating. So rajasic food is very spicy, very sweet, very sour, very bitter, anything that has a very in front of it is rajasic. Right? So South Indian food can be very spicy, so it's beautiful. You look at it, it's pleasing, oh, lovely colors and a banana leaf, and oh, fantastic coconut chutneys. Oh, be careful. And you bite it. Oh, and someone went mad. Someone lost it in the kitchen with the chilies and went mad with the chilies, and your head blows off. So that's another example of something that's sattvic, but then it's very rajasic when you taste it, and then maybe if you're not used to it as a Westerner, then it gives you tamas and you have an upset stomach. Okay, so sattva is considered to be buoyant and enlightening, rajas to be stimulating and mobile. Any form of mobility whatsoever comes from rajas. If there was no rajas, there would be a static universe. Nothing would move. And tamas alone is heavy and enveloping. They function by union of contraries for a purpose, and they cooperate like a lamp. There's the lamp example. Let's just read the lamp example. We don't need to read the whole thing. Go to 79 at the very end. Last 5 lines on the bottom. Like a lamp, they operate to achieve. Okay, and we're not missing anything. He's just giving examples. He compares Rajas to a bull. And what else? Fickleness, tamas, All right, but let's go to the example. Like a lamp, they operate to achieve a common purpose. Just as a lamp, right? It has three things: a wick, oil, and a flame. They're completely different things. So, but the three things can come together to illumine objects. So the attributes of then they're completely opposite things. Wick is completely different from oil, which is thick and unctuous. Flame is energy and ephemeral, and so on. But they come together and they function, and they produce light. So in the same way, the attributes of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, although contrary to one another, they affect a common purpose. And therefore, when they come together, their intermixtures are infinite. Think of colors. Think of red, yellow, and blue. There is no limit to the number of colors. They are infinite. You can have 1 part yellow, 1 part blue, 1 part red. 1 part yellow, 1 part blue, 2 parts red. You could keep going infinitely with 1 part yellow, 1 part blue, and just keep increasing red, and you'd never get to the end. What to speak of if you change the proportions of red and yellow? So think of the gunas like that. And that's why there is the variety of beings and plants and rocks, and everything is different from something else by dint of having some proportionality of the gunas unique to it and different from any other thing. Okay, so here's 2 pens. What ultimately we can talk about them as atoms and quarks and strings or whatever, but what if we talk about them as their ultimate substratum? Why is this like this and this like this? Well, this is probably blue. It's got a bit more tamas in it. Red is a sign of rajas. So this has more, so both of them are sattva, rajas, and tamas. But this might maybe have 5 degrees of tamas and 2. I'm making this up. 5 tamas, 2 rajas, and this has 5 rajas, 2 tamas. Whatever the story, the difference between one thing and another is nothing other than the proportionality of the gunas that make up the all of the everything other than Purusha, all ingredients of external reality and internal reality, the mind. Happy one day, sad one day, deluded another day. Constantly mood is, why is our moods changing? Because the gunas are constantly changing, constantly. And then time to go to bed, tamas takes over. Time to get up, first raja stirs, dream, REM, and then finally sattva manifests and the organs of perception become aware. Okay, it's daytime. Okay, time to get up. So everything is what it is because of the proportionality of the gunas. All right, so there we have it. So that was verse 15. And moreover, what else? What are the reasons? Because the attributes, the gunas, affect variously. I'm in rajas, you're in sattva. I'm in tamas, you're in rajas. By the different modifications of the 3 attributes, they modify differently. Forms are different. Some people are rajasic, some forms are tamasic, like a tree. So therefore what? Therefore there must be a plurality of purushas. By the different modifications of the 3 gunas, the plurality of the purushas is proved. For instance, in ordinary life, one who is sattvika is happy. Keep this in mind, by the way. It goes against our consumer culture. I'm going to repeat this. Gita or sattva is happiness. And we're talking about material prakritic happiness. Let's be clear. We're not talking about the bliss of the Atman. That's way down the road. Just right here and now, in this body, with this mind, how can we feel happiness in this body mind, right? We haven't made it to the bliss of the Atman yet. Okay, so in the meantime, how at least can we feel a little bit of, happiness while we're on the road, on the path? Sattva is happiness. Rajas is suffering. Keep that in mind. Tamas is delusion, just madness, just making stuff up in fantasy. So pay attention. Next time you're overwhelmed by rajas, just notice how unhappy you are. Next time you're obsessed by the desire or some sense that you need to do something or some running around, just step back for a second, activate your higher self, activate your Jnana Samskara. What is the Jnana Samskara? This is the Jnana Samskara, the information we get from the scriptures. Where does Jnana come from? It doesn't self-manifest. It's not magic. It has to come into the mind. That's why we study, my friends. Some study is metaphysically dense like this. Some, like the Upanishads, are beautiful and poetic. Some, like the Gita, are practical and easy to understand. It's all svadhyaya, and a bit of metaphysical workout's not a bad thing. And that's what this text is. So the attributes, right? So this, how does this prove the Purusha? Well, one who is sattvic is happy, another rajas is unhappy. You know, think of our present president, quintessential rajas. Not very tamasic. I mean, it's tamas there. And look how miserable he is. Became the president of the United States, look how miserable it is. Infinite desires, infinite. Like a fire, you keep throwing fuel in it. What does it do? It doesn't put the fire out, it just burns more. So rajas is unhappy, while a third, tamas, simply deluded. So when we get deluded, we just kind of make stuff up in our head. In this manner, right, we're putting all this together, from the different modifications of the gunas is the plurality established, right? So 5 reasons are given. You can decide what you think of them.